Hello and welcome back to Kankakee Podcast, where we talk about the people and places of Kankakee County, Illinois. I'm Jake LaMore, and today we're counting down the 10 most listened to episodes of Kankakee Podcast released in 2024. This year's been full of amazing stories and unforgettable moments, so let's relive some of them together, starting with number 10. At number 10, we have episode 138 featuring Dr. Leonard Porter. He shared the incredible journey of founding the Akubalan History Center right here in Kankakee, a space dedicated to preserving and sharing the rich history of the Black community. Now, we touched on his personal connection to this history, including some stories that were passed down from, I believe, his great-grandmother or great-great-grandmother who lived through slavery. Now, this episode is an eye-opening look at how understanding our past can inspire progress to the future.
And I left there and went to college in Little Rock, Arkansas. And I went there for 4 years. I got a bachelor degree in sociology and education. And while I was there, while I was there, I was on a kind of like a deferment from the Army because I was in college. As soon as I graduated, Uncle Sam gave me a rifle.
Oh,
and so
that's right. You're a Vietnam veteran.
Yeah. So when I graduated, he gave me the rifle, and I was inducted in August. I graduated in May. I was inducted in August. So I went to a graduate school in Arkansas, working on a master's degree in education, thinking that would help the deferment, but it did not.
At number 9 is episode 136 with Kevin Mitch Mitchell, a plumber from Kankakee who accidentally went viral during the Super Bowl halftime show in 2019. I don't know if you remember the Illinois Sharpie tattoo and his hilarious Adam Levine impression, but it was all good and fun, and it turned Mitch into a local legend. Now, we laughed a lot during this episode, and it's a great reminder that sometimes humor is the best way to bring people together.
This is me. Do you think Adam Levine knows who I am?
I mean, I'm sure he does, right? I know you post that frequently, like thinking like, wow, Adam Levine knows who I am.
He's I'd be shocked if he's not seen it, right? I'm sure the man uses the internet or has somebody that uses the internet for him. I don't know how much money he has.
I mean, with all the media coverage that meme got, he has to have seen it and knows.
Yeah, I would think.
You know.
So that's a little weird. Like some world famous celebrity has seen me shirtless.
It is such a weird thought. That is so bizarre. At number 8 is episode 140 with Johanna Holloway that was guest hosted by Derek Grant. And it talks about her personal, or goes through her journey of personal growth and resilience. She spoke about how she uses creative workshops like vision boarding and empowerment sessions to help local youth see the world with more hope and kindness. Now, Derek did a great job guest hosting this episode and really brought a fresh perspective to the conversation. Now, if you're looking for inspiration and practical advice on building a stronger community, this episode is a must listen.
In Kankakee Podcast fashion, I have to ask the great question that Jake LaMore asks. Mostly everybody, he asks me. Where does life start for Johanna Holloway?
So, life started for me in 2020.
2020, okay.
So, and the reason why I say that is, and we could go back to my early years, but I like to start there because that's when I discovered who I was. Before that, I was kind of just like lost. I was existing, and I didn't know who I was. So the Johanna you see in front of you, she emerged in 2020. And so I know we'll probably go more in depth about that experience, but that's just the year that everything was tested for me. I had went through a sudden divorce.
Coming in at number 7 is a bonus episode of Kankakee Podcast, and I think this is the first time a bonus episode has landed into a 10 most listened to episodes episode. This is with the Kankakee Valley Theater Association, where we were talking about the production of the classic musical, The Producers. I was actually joined by one of my coworkers here at Kankakee Podcast and Pathfinder, Andrew McBurney, who was one of the leads in The Producers, along with his castmate, Cody Margikitis. Now, we talked about the rest of the talented cast and crew to hear how they brought this comedic masterpiece to life on stage. From the casting process to the choreography, they shared the behind-the-scenes moments that made this production so special. If you love theater, this episode is for you.
So in order to ensure that the play is unsuccessful, they have to find a show that will fail immediately.
The worst show ever written.
The worst show ever written.
We set out to look for.
They happen to come across a gem, Springtime for Hitler, a gay romp with Ava and Adolf at Berchtesgaden. Oh my God. And so they got to get the rights from the owner, who happens to be a Nazi who lives on a rooftop with pigeons and always has a German helmet on.
And in New York City, right?
And this is like
New
the
York.
50s and the golden age of Broadway, when you had like, Sound of Music, My Fair Lady all coming out. They got to find a director. They got to find the worst director. They find Roger, this eccentric, very happy director to ensure that the show is unsuccessful and just wild and gaudy.
And number 6 is episode 161, where we explored the fascinating history of Hotel Kankakee with Jack Clacy and Jory Walters of the Kankakee County Museum. Every year, at least a few episodes from the Kankakee County Museum land in our top 10. It was once the crown jewel of downtown Kankakee. The hotel has seen its share of glitz, glamour, and intrigue. Now, we dug into its architectural legacy, famous guests, and the stories hidden within its walls. So for history buffs, this episode is a treasure trove of local lore.
So if you're in downtown Kankakee, you're on Schuyler. You're on where the library, the executive building is. Now that whole block, that side of that block, on the corner, the bottom, when you go down the hill for Merchant in Schuyler, it sat on the corner. However, before it sat on the corner, this house sat on the corner.
Oh, wow.
Surrounded by business buildings.
Surrounded by business buildings.
I guess that kind of goes back to one of, actually, I think it was the French Heritage Museum episode. We were talking about how there used to be houses a lot closer to downtown.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
At number 5, we have the July edition of Yarn Factory Listeners. This is episode 159. Now, Yarn Factory Listeners is something brand new to Kankakee Podcast this year, and just brand new to the community in general. This is an event that Bill Yonka started doing this year at Flanagan's Irish Pub in the basement of the Majestic in downtown Kankakee. And when he announced that he was starting to do this monthly storytelling event with Kankakee area residents, I jumped at the chance to partner up with him and see if we could record these stories and have them featured on Kankakee Podcast. I'm so grateful that Bill said yes. Now, this one was packed with heartfelt and relatable tales from our listeners. Now, these listeners submitted stories remind us how much life in Kankakee is filled with both challenges and triumphs.
When I tell you this dude turned into Indiana Jones, he grabbed a rope, jumps off the boat, swims over to me, ties it off, pulls me back in, tows me to shore.
We have a tie for number 4, and I remember during last year's 10 most listened to episode countdown, we did have one tie and if not 2 ties. But first is episode 139, which takes us to Pembroke Township, where the Kankakee County Museum teamed up with us once again and shared stories about its founding and the community's strength in overcoming challenges through its history. The insights from the museum staff, Jack Clacy and Jory Walters, painted a vivid picture of life in Pembroke, both past and present.
Actually, Pembroke is very unusual because, among other things, it is the largest township of the 17 townships in Kankakee County, and also the youngest. It was formed on February 17th, 1877, out of parts of Momence and St. Anne townships. And so it filled in the space down there that previously was part of the others. It also is different from most of the rest of the county in terms of the land.
Isn't it sandy?
It's very
right?
sandy and is relatively poor soil compared to the really deep, rich soils out in the western part of the county and the central part of the county. It's I think a leftover from the Ice Age, where that would have been the shoreline, perhaps, of one of the huge lakes that from the melting glaciers that covered this area.
And tied with the Pembroke episode is episode 180, a more recent episode where we were joined by the Cat's Pajamas for a lively conversation about their work and also the Winter Wonderland pub crawl.
If it makes you feel better, we did cover misery business in a church.
Oh, we
for
did,
a church event.
Nice.
Yeah,
so I
did.
mean, like, that was pretty punk rock.
Did I say the W word?
Because that's a pretty
I don't
wholesome
know.
song, you know?
Yeah, it's not like
mean,
anyone could hear me or anything.
I think
Sure,
people
the worst
started
acoustics.
throwing stuff at us that time.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
started breaking, like, the chalice over our hair or whatever it's
Yeah.
called.
Yeah.
Chalice.
Everything. Bottles. And
I still have scars.
When
Yeah.
you guys played Misery Business in a church,
Yes.
is that what you're saying?
yeah, yeah.
So they started like throwing, they just started going
They, like,
crazy.
picked
Like
up
in
the
a,
Yeah.
altar and, like, chucked it.
So was this in like a mosh pit, like they were getting into it, or was this like
Christian mosh
they
pit.
they were not liking this and they were so angry that they threw the altar? Like,
I don't think they explained it to us.
No,
they
they
didn't
just-
explain that they.
so really it could have been a really great mosh pit, or it
Yes.
could have been like a mob.
Yeah.
Probably
Well,
a mob.
Felt like a
I'll
mob.
say
Taking the number 3 spot is episode 164. This was the August edition of Yarn Factory listeners. This episode featured a mix of moving, funny, and thought-provoking tales from our listeners. A fan favorite story was about Pete Worth, who shared a story from his wedding night. These episodes are just such a joy because they highlight the voices and experiences of our incredible community.
The driver dropped us off at our doorstep, sped away, and we were finally, blissfully alone. Corey looked at me with her beautiful hazel green eyes and whispered, "Do you have your keys?" "Do you have yours?" She didn't. "Okay, give me your phone," Corey said. There we were, a little past 1 a.m., stranded in front of our own house, still in full wedding attire and absolutely no way to contact our friends or family. Now I'm going to pause and cut back to the wedding. At my parents' house, the party was still going strong at 1:30. My in-laws, Tim and Robin, were still partying at the reception when Tim noticed 2 missed calls from an unknown number. His phone rang again, and this time he answered. "Hello? Yeah, we were just checking on the bride and groom that were walking in the street with nowhere to go. Do you know if they're okay?"
Sliding into number 2 is episode 132, which is the very first episode we released in 2024, where we sat down with Spaziri Reptile Rescue, Nico, and Sharon. Now, in this episode, we learned how amazing this organization is about helping reptiles that are often misunderstood or abandoned. Now, the team shared fascinating stories about their most unusual rescues, like a massive iguana found in a parking lot. Now, this episode not only educated us about reptiles, but also showcased the dedication of people working to protect these creatures in Kankakee County. Where does the rescue start? How long has it been around?
I guess if you ask any rescuer, they're going to tell you that it starts in the heart.
Yeah.
But in reality, our start was about 5 years ago. She just wanted a snake. And, you know, as most keepers come, you just start as a small hobbyist. We realized shortly that it was, you know, very misconstrued that the care about most reptiles was easy. We realized that there's a lot of breeders local to out here. And then we actually realized that there's no real help. You've got about 5 exotic rescues that can provide actual care.
And finally, the moment you have been waiting for, the most listened to episode of 2024. I was surprised by this. I was not expecting it to be this episode. And that is episode 152, all about the USS Kankakee with the Kankakee County Museum. Now, this episode took us through the ship's history and its connection to our community. We got to learn how the Kankakee County Museum is preserving this important piece of naval history, and it's no surprise that this episode was a favorite. It's a heartfelt tribute to those who served and a reminder of the incredible stories rooted right here in Kankakee.
The AO-39, which was the official designation of the ship, the Kankakee, USS Kankakee, was a member of the Kennebec class of fleet oilers, basically floating gas stations or tankers. The Kennebec class was named for American rivers with a Native American origin. Their names are Native American origin. And there I believe 6 that were in World War II that were named, that were part of the Kennebec class. The Kennebec, Merrimack, Winooski, Lackawanna, Neosho, and of course, Kankakee.
There you have it, the top 10 episodes of 2024, the most listened to episodes by you. Thank you for an amazing year and for continuing your support of Kankakee Podcast. Special thanks to our sponsors, Chicago Dough Company, Pigosh Engineering, King Music, Little Me Studio, Nana's Bakery, Stafari West Avenue, Pathfinder, Frank's Appliance Center and Sleep Source, Noble Dairy Queen Stores, D. Westfall Jewelers, Taco John's, Edward Jones Financial Advisor Adam Elroy, Meineke Car Care Center, and the Akupalan History Center. If you have a favorite episode or story idea for 2025, just hit us up on social media. You can find us at Kankakee Podcast. Here's to more great conversations in the new year. Until next time, I'm Jake LaMore. Thank you so much for listening to Kankakee Podcast, and Happy New Year.